So I just want to thank you all for being here, and let's go ahead and get started. For those of you who I haven't met before, my name is Dave Elving. I'm the interim executive director here at San Francisco Camerawork. And as we get started, we like to take a moment just to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral lands of the Ohlone people. And we recognize that here in the Bay Area and as a San Francisco organization, even though we're not meeting in that space, we're kind of in the ether here online. That's where we're at and where we're from. So thank you all for joining us here tonight. This is, I think, the fifth of our forecast talks for 2020, and it's been a really exciting month of November, where we've had groups of artists around similar themes share their work and then be in conversation with each other. And we're excited to continue that today. So today we'll hear from three artists who, if you go visit our site, they have a lot of accolades. The accolade I really like to call out is that they were all chosen amongst hundreds of applicants to be a part of our Forecast 2020 exhibit. And we're really glad to have them here. Today you'll hear from Trenton Brown and William Camargo and Valerie Mendoza. They all have work in Forecast that is incredibly unique, and yet there are these themes that the jurors and we at Camerawork started to notice around ideas of capitalism, displacement, commercialism, and each of these artists approaches these themes in their own ways. So you'll hear from each of them, you'll see their work, and then most interestingly, they will be in conversation with each other. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I'd ask for you to wait maybe until you hear from all three of our artists, and then you can join the conversation with all of them. So we'll hear from all of them, and then we'll have a moment for questions. Sorry, I skipped a groove in my brain there. I wanted to remind you that we are recording this. So if you would like to unmute and ask a question, we would love that, but just be aware that you will be a part of that recording. If you prefer not to and just want to use the chat, that's fine too. So you've heard enough from me. Let's kick it off and start with the artists. We'll begin with Trenton Brown. Trenton, thanks for being with us tonight.
Hi, how you all doing?
Right.
I'm very, very, very appreciative to be able to be a part of this and to see everybody coming in. This is major. So let me go ahead and start sharing my screen.
Yeah, please. You can get going however you like.
Hold on. Kind of. There we go. Sorry about that.
Oh, good.
So yes, my name is Trenton Brown. The name of this particular project is called Ice Tea. And it was all shot in IKEA of Atlanta, Georgia. All right, so as we move across this plane of time, we come across souls that we bond with. In this bond, there are unspoken expressions that allow us to communicate and enlighten or remove senses. In this, there are a lot of connections that are deeper than just touch. Our home is a creative safe haven, and this space allows a lot of vulnerability in that, a lot of freedom that a lot of times you can't get from, being in the outside world. And it's a lot of judgment sometimes that people can feel from that. In this, we have a deeper development of self, thus surrounding us with like people. We begin to intertwine and connect with each other. I personally believe that man and everything around us is, well, I'll say everything that we create is thus a reflection of ourselves. In that, I believe that our higher power, if you believe in that, which I do, our higher power, which thus gives us those creations, it is then a lineage back to that higher power, I believe. So my goal, and when I shoot, is a lot of times to create that parallel or create that balance between it all. Now, when I began this project, we started with the idea of shooting in IKEA, because we one thing is we saw that like Virgil Abloh was one of the people of color that allowed that IKEA kind of pulled, you know, to allow his creative endeavors to flow through their platform. And you know, us being youth, we're college kids. We decided to, as you can kind of see, we chose their colors. We decided to pull their platform as like kind of like a foundation for us to show how like the creative space could just be more than just a living space, but also a facility of art. Me personally, I do a lot of my creative endeavors. You know, I shoot a lot outside of my house instead of like in the studio, but I do a lot of my creative endeavors outdoors. However, indoors is where I spend a lot of my time masterminding and doing self-development. And like I said, in IKEA, each kind of aspect of IKEA has this different set. So it allowed me to then kind of go into that area and then just kind of flow with it. A lot of times, I'll be honest, a lot of times when I go into projects, I don't necessarily have a set constraint. I kind of just go in there and let things kind of flow around me. So with that being said, let me continue. Let me keep going. Our perception of being disconnected in the physical plane, I personally believe is not the same as in the metaphysical plane. So with that being said, as you can kind of see here, these are sisters named Akara and Kofo. And they have, of course, like this ability to feel each other's presence without, you know, being near each other or speak without words. And that was really my concept going into it. But there is a like a displacement where there has been a lack of a full, I kind of say, incorporation into how furniture is a oneness, no matter the any type of confinement. Let's say it like that. So right here is there at IKEA, they have twine, where of course, like if you were purchasing something, you would be able to take that twine and wrap up your items and continue about your day. Well, I kind of use that twine in this aspect to show that if you can kind of look at the parallels, you can kind of tell that there's some type of conversation that's being had here. However, there is no conversation here, but strictly emotions being shown and pursued through the face, through body language. So with that being said, you know, everything around us has, even where things are strategically placed in your house, is a reflection of at least where you were in that time. That's why a lot of people go back in their house and they kind of rearrange, or they'll, you know, be in like a different space, and they'll be like, all right, well, let me, you know, make that arrange in not just my life personally, but in what's around me as well. So yeah, and this kind of concept, I was just trying to intertwine them around each other, but also intertwine them around the space. And just, like I said, just kind of everything about a lot of my projects are about oneness. Everything is about oneness. I try to combine and show how there are parallels between just the things that we feel are physical and the things that are internal. Keep going. And last but not least, our homes are an extension of ourselves. The items that we place in our living spaces are reflections of who we are. Therefore, we must be conscious of not just the people surrounding us, but also the objects in our presence as well. Our life seems to be a consistent revolution to obtain balance, and we will achieve that with a higher knowledge of oneself. So to conclude, capitalism has definitely played a major role in how information has been presented through the world. And the original goal with this was honestly to work with IKEA, to be able to have a I put it like this. I was 21 at the time when I made this project, and I was a college student at Georgia Southern, and at this point in my life, this was like the main time where, you know, people buy their first house, or they get into their first apartment, or they get into their first dorm. And what IKEA really offered was, you know, the ability for people to come in there and buy items at a very nice, you know, reasonable price, but then to also be able to have a little bit more creative expression. So that is really how we wanted to filter our artistic creative endeavors through, and be able to just show how the creative space is deeper than just what is visible. It is also about the energy and the frequency and the power of what you put around you as well. And in harnessing that power and taking the time to understand yourself, you would then have the ability to properly manifest whatever entity you're trying to conquer. So that was really where my heart is, and that's what that's it.
That's,
So thank you. I appreciate you all.
thank you, Trenton, for sharing your work. You know, when I hear you speak, and I remember when I saw your application with your work, your worldview came through. And it was interesting to me because you talk about togetherness and connectedness. And you sort of anticipated my question with what you were just saying about why you chose to work in an IKEA. My first impression when I saw the work, I, there's just this surreal relationship with these connected, amazingly beautiful young people who are unique and connected in a unique way. And yet IKEA is something I associate with ununique for everybody. And I perceived, and I don't want to speak to the jurors or to your work, but there's this I see a tension in the work, and yet when you talk about the work, it is entirely about harmony and connection. I wonder if you can speak to that just a little bit more. Is that intentional? Did it emerge?
Yeah.
Did people look at you funny when you were in the IKEA? Did they think you were
No,
trying
let's
to
talk
make
about that.
fun of
So,
IKEA? Like, what's
so
going on?
listen, yo. So as you can see, they changed fits a couple times. So when the young ladies were like braiding their hair, so they actually braided their hair together in the IKEA. And you know, at first, so like, you know, at first you're like, oh my gosh, you about to do this in IKEA. Of course they're going, but like honestly, it's just like, why not? Let's just try it. So we went in there, and honestly, the people who were like working there was like, you know, as long as you all don't move anything too crazy, go for it. And then what was even more beautiful about it was we honestly had customers that would stop us and take pictures with us. Like we had like a whole like crowd of people that were like legit, like, hold on 1 second, can we take a picture with you all? And the girls were like with their hair braided together, like pose with the guys, you feel me, or the young ladies or whatever. So like it was honestly like a beautiful moment. It was honestly beautiful. Now when I like to speak on the harmony, honestly, sir, like everything about where at least my current and at this particular time my life has been about is about showing how we are greater than just what we touch, what we see, like this realm, period. So honestly, showing that harmony and showing that ability to have a light in darkness is kind of like where my energy has always kind of been. I wouldn't say always, because I do definitely have like some dark themes, like as you can kind of see, like I have this shirt on that I took a picture of. However, I would definitely say when it came to this at this particular moment in my life, these were two, honestly, I have to speak on these young ladies because they play a big part as well. These young ladies are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful energies. They're beautiful women, beautiful people. So even in just working with them, and honestly, when it comes to me and my work, especially when I work with people of this caliber, of just their modeling caliber, but this also their mental caliber, as we were developing and talking about it, you know, just their energy, it only made sense for us to be able to convey a sense of beauty and a sense of oneness between, because you know, honestly, like I said, we're trying to work with IKEA, so we always, I always try to be the best fossil of like as possible. And yeah, I don't know. At this point in time in my life, like it was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. I can't even really speak on it. It's just a lot of emotion. It
I
was just
think that works. And I feel like the light at the end of the tunnel we all need is something to do with connectedness and oneness. And that's a
love,
love that that
love.
sentiment comes through in your
Absolutely.
work. I'm going to stop the share of your presentation so we can just say, hey, again. And thank you again for sharing your work, Trenton. We appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll do this. Unfortunately, we haven't figured out how to do applause properly in Zoom, but thank you all for your little emojis. That helps. It matters. Trenton, thanks again. We have two more artists to hear from, and then I'm eager to get into the conversation, and we'll see where it goes tonight. I think it's going to be exciting. For now, we're going to hand it off to William Camargo. William, thank you for being here. Exciting to see your work again, and I'll hand it off to you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I'm going to start sharing just to make sure we are good. So for everyone that doesn't know my work or hasn't checked that out, there's most of the stuff that's in there, but I think that there's a couple of like new images that I try to show my process as well, and what kind of, where do I grab my resources, and how do I kind of come up with the idea. So I'm William Camargo. I'm a photo-based artist. I'm a community archivist, an advocate of art, and also an educator. And I like to start off with a kind of more personal beginning. This was recently archived through a friend of mine's collective called Accept Collective, which is it's Southern California-based home video archive collective. I was able to send my VHS right before the pandemic, and I was, got it free digitized as long as it was in their digital collections. And it took me back to where I grew up and, where I come from, the kind of aesthetic of a community. And it's a very kind of quintessential 90s Southern California, Chicanx community that I grew up in. This is the 90s. I kind of probably give off my age right there. That's my 4th birthday party on the left. And this is someone, the right, this is my cousin, who he was a lot older than I am. But I have this kind of connection that folks, whenever I posted this picture, they kind of see this, they see the relationship that we have. And, this is very much Anaheim, California, which is, it's not too much of a small city, but it houses Disneyland. And it kind of shows how, Disneyland is this huge conglomerate that really controls a lot of what's going on in the city, where money is given to which communities kind of benefit from this this huge capitalistic theme park. My community wasn't one of them, so yeah, it kind of shows the way these big businesses can kind of really hash out communities and districts to their advantage. And when I came back, I was living away for a while, and I came back to look at archives. I think archives were, I had never seen any of these from my hometown. I knew, we were predominantly Latinx community, and I knew that somehow, there was history there. And I went to the little public libraries that we have. We have a heritage center. This is where I found out a lot of the history that was really taught in my upbringing in public school. And it creates this kind of erasure between communities, and somehow kind of doesn't empower us. It takes these powers away from Black, Indigenous, and queer communities and brown communities in Southern California. And so this is a La Palma Elementary, which is it was an all Mexican school. I forgot to put the year, but it was 1946. And it doesn't exist anymore. So there's no record of it aside from kind of like these school pictures. Because it is Orange County it was all orange groves. You know, they wanted the kids of of the workers there to go to their own schools, right? So again, this is, time of segregation back in the 40s. And I connected a lot with the way I grew up. These are kind of everyday happenings in my neighborhood. The shooting, gang violence, even just kind of any time where folks are with like a death in the family, and the community comes together and kind of creates these little happenings or ephemeral moments that I like to call, and where we have this kind of connectedness with each other, in a sense of trying to help out, right? This is, it comes back to kind of, we trade was a thing of our past, and it's a thing of now, and it's a thing of our futures, right? And this was, right, you saw it was photographed in 2011. And also because, a lot of the histories in my city were, were not taught. There was a lot of research behind the work. There's a couple Instagram accounts that do hold amazing kind of new digital archives. And again, like, I'm not a traditional trained archivist. So there's also that kind of, we're trying to decouple the way archives are being handled, who has access to them, how are they kind of, put out in the world, especially with archives of BIPOC folks, when we kind of know what institutions have done to our art, our archives, our stories. And I created a work like this, and this is depictions of the happiest place on earth through gang signs. And this is something that's very personal to me. This is a connection with the way I grew up and the family that I have. And this is was on the New York Times. It was a, we're in this moment of photography where it can kind of be a tool for injustice or a tool for the social justice movements. And we need I wouldn't say representation, but we need control of some of those stories. I definitely think representation is not equally lead up to liberation for our communities. And this was, an attempt for a group of folks called Diversified Photo to try to change the narrative and put folks more into roles of leadership in these institutions. We hope that people keep hiring Black photographers after the uprisings in the summer, and continue to kind of gear that towards some sort of liberation for communities. And this is some of the most current work that I do have in this show, and it was part of my thesis project, which is called Origins and Displacements on Making Sense of Place, Histories, and Possibilities. And I definitely insert myself in these photographs now, instead of I still kind of document the neighborhoods, but I kind of try to create this different way of accessing and putting out that knowledge of the archives that I did find. Because I do have to deal with communities that are underrepresented in my own city. We have to be careful of how I make the work, and it comes out in outside of my community. And this is a park that I used to go to I played soccer as a teenager, and this is one of the parks that I did practice. And because our histories are sometimes erased, or it's difficult to find these archives, we have to deal with trying to validate that history and that lived experience, because of how institutions are run. It's, who is the validator of knowledge in institutions, and it's mostly white males. And so me standing in this kind of space in which maybe several years ago, I wasn't able to stand in. And again, we were not sure of which side of the park was the part that Black folks, Mexican and Native Americans were not allowed because of that erasure. And this is a picture taken in the 20s at that same park, again, without much information from the archivist. It's just a picture in the 1920s at the what is called Anaheim City Center Park. So I'm imagining that this is the part where BIPOC folks were able to kind of actually gather around. And then, I think I have been documenting my neighborhood for quite a while, and in my city for quite a while. And we've seen this change that, there is new buildings going up. There's histories being erased. This is a mural by a great Chicano muralist named Emilio Vasquez, who depicts a scene after he created this mural after a police brutality encounter with folks in this neighborhood called Penguin City. And the mural is kind of fading out. We don't have a public arts program. And so this history is left kind of untold. And myself as an educator, I'm trying to kind of as well insert that history into school curriculum, into education as it is meant to be a form of liberation. So this is kind of less seen nowadays when we had a kind of thriving mural program, public art program in Anaheim. And I also, along with that, I also try to challenge and negotiate and also deconstruct the canon in photography. Stephen Shore is one that I see often, and I'm inspired by his work, but I'm also thinking about how we should dismantle that and then kind of create a new canon, or even just not with the same word canon, but I think the canon is also going to be a dangerous tool. We see in the history of photography what is done to Black, indigenous and queer brown folks, right? Eugenics and Manifest Destiny with the early kind of landscape work that was being done in the West. And I think it connects with what is happening in current cities. This image is currently being shown in an exhibition at a local museum, but of course with a lot of pushback. And I'm thankful for the director of this place called Museo in Anaheim, who put her job on the line. The director put, she said, we're going to show this because it is history and it is and if folks try to, again, censor that, there was a huge backlash with that. So, I think the board of directors really changed their mind on that situation. Because again, we were led up to moments in the past that definitely have this effect on our current histories. Right, and along with, I notice things when I am photographing the neighborhood and in other cities that I've gone. We definitely see this resourcefulness in communities of color. Instead of using Craigslist, we still have this very much in my neighborhood. Right, and this is kind of another photograph that uses archives as a starting point, and then I kind of create these interventions, happenings in these same spaces that are kind of contradictory sometimes. So there's the famous Anaheim packing house, and to, I think, to erase the folks that did work there, especially a brown woman, um, has led up to a moment now that the packing house is, it is a kind of, you can buy $7 popsicles or paletas. It's definitely turned into the space that it is not for the neighborhood. We don't see ourselves there. I've never stepped inside there. Uh, and because, the city also, um, these amendments give a lot to the city, but especially in council races. Um, it is very much to, their benefit to create these spaces that will have folks from Disneyland come through and go to the packing house and kind of shop there. And this is where the inspiration from that photograph came from. So it was around the 1930s in the packing house, which is the kind of downtown area of our city. And the way I approach, photography and how I also try to hold myself accountable of trying not to be complicit in these, in gentrification, right? We've seen how art and gentrification sometimes are right in the same sentence. And I think it's a way we approach these, these issues as someone who is, in a position of privilege. I have 2 degrees. And we know that there's that kind of like wealth gap between folks that have degrees and not. But we definitely have to kind of, challenge that and see what we can do to not be complicit in gentrification. And I take this from, a great essay that was written in the 90s that states, what does it mean to have or indeed to be with an image of oneself? How is that image constructed? How is that image controlled? To have an image implies the rights of ownership. To be with an image implies a relation of cooperation, community. And that's, I think, it separates the way I work versus, canonical figures like John Davola or Stephen Shore, even the greats like Ansel Adams, right? And if someone does want to Google this really quick, this is a great article that I think goes to the point of how we, how we can kind of try not to be complicit with gentrification. It was done right after a lot of the issues in Boyle Heights were happening. A lot of the art galleries were coming there. Thankfully, there's not much. Some of them have left. And it was because of the pressure of community, right? We have to, and then again, now, there was something happened in the East Side. Some mothers took some homes and they're, these houses that were owned by the state and just left there, right? Which is, I think, a kind of form of what folks call speculation. They leave something and say it because they know that's probably going to be the next hotspot for artists, for musicians, for these nicer kind of restaurants, pop-ups. So we have this huge issue with houselessness, and we have places like laying empty, perfect homes, and they came up and right on Thanksgiving morning and really just, I don't know how many cops were there with rifles and SWAT, like militarization of police, and can, drag the family out. Yeah. And again, I'm always looking at the canon and how we can kind of also challenge that and then dismantle it. And this series is a continuation, and it kind of got me in a little, I wouldn't say trouble, but some kind of fight with John Davola. And this is was after these kind of shootings of Black folks getting shot by police, and then some brown folks too as well. And when we, there's a great article on I think the San Francisco Chronicle about how gentrification can literally kill folks that grew up in those neighborhoods, right? The constant policing of spaces that there seem to be, desirable for new shops, new restaurants, new art spaces, get after more police by newcomers, right? And again, this work is also in the show, and I made this during the pandemic because I think, thinking about how our communities are resourceful and this idea that, that tidiness is a kind of view of wealth. When my parents did buy a home, we had more space to store stuff, and we don't really throw stuff away. And I came back and I was, quarantining, and I made this work and just grab whatever stuff I can from the garage, from the backyard, and create these images. Which goes back to this kind of idea of rascachismo, which is a novel term that's very much been turned into a kind of aesthetic for the Chicanx art movement. That was, a great essay written by Tomás Ibarra Fraso, an amazing queer Chicanx scholar. Says, very generally, rascachismo is an underdog perspective, a view from los de abajo, an attitude rooted in resourcefulness and adaptability, yet mindful of stance and style. Things that are rascuache possess an ephemeral quality, a sense of temporality and impermanence, here today and gone tomorrow. And I think, the work that I try to do is also very much tied with that concept. I think that's pretty much it. I'm gonna stop sharing if that's okay.
Thank you, William. As you go through your work, and I've seen you speak to some of your other work as well, the word history, story, archive, these terms come up a lot, and you're sharing work that is from an archive. Then there are places where you're taking elements from history and almost inserting it into the image with the signs. And then some of my favorites of your work, you've kind of created your own story. You've put people in the frame. You've given them things to hold that are around them. I'm thinking of the image. I think you showed it earlier, the man with all the hats on his head. And so I'm asking about your relationship to history. It feels like you are documenting, like you are inserting history, and then in some ways making up your own almost surreal kind of history as it's going. How are you using story in your work in terms of how you make it? I feel like that question made no sense whatsoever. Yeah. I just feel like you're influenced by story and creating story, and at the same time preserving story. How are these things intertwining in your work? Maybe is a way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the beginning, a lot of the work that I do deal is kind of through lived experience and through my own kind of lived experience in the city that had all these issues, that police violence, etc., displacement, houselessness. And I think, that idea of intersectionality, which is an idea that was seen in the famous, well, not famous, but if folks know the Combahee River Collective statement, is how we can kind of intersect these issues with communities that are not ours as well. And all those affect many communities, indigenous, Black, brown, queer, and there's other great artists that do it from another perspective, right? But we can intersect our lived experiences and kind of move forward and see what we kind of learn from each other. It's not like right. So I think, I think that's, from, in art school, I didn't want to take all art classes, and I was like, I want to learn a little more about, um, me as a brown person, and other stories. So, I took these other classes to kind of learn about that, because in photo history, there still isn't much, literature, books that do cover kind of like a photo history of the quote unquote other, right? Um, that definitely makes work, about lived experiences and
Mm.
connections with community and alongside community, right?
I,
You
I
know,
love the way you've managed to reveal more of the community through documentation with archives, through your own unique artworks with the signs, and then creating with the community photographs where you're almost assembling it and creating new stories. It comes together in a way that I think is more compelling, and offers greater understanding, and and that intersectionality makes it greater than the sum of its parts. We could go on for a while. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'm looking forward to discussing it more in a little bit with all of you. But for now, I want to take a moment. We can have our clap emojis. And I want to hand the mic to our third artist, Valerie Mendoza. Valerie, thank you for joining us here today. Excited to see your work again and learn more about it. And then we'll come back and discuss with all of the artists you presented. So please, Valerie. I'm not hearing your microphone though, Valerie, so you might have to unmute there. We all have that Zoom habit.
Thank you. Thanks for reminding me. So I brought a selection of work that is sort of expands out from the work that I showed here in Forecast, which is a tiny part of a larger body of work that I've been working on for a number of years and have plans to continue to work on into the near future. So this is the piece that all of you are familiar with. It's part of the show. And it's actually, it's the finished version of a piece that I've been working on for a really long time. And it started with this other piece called Monument 91 Images of One Vacant Property for Sale. And I talked a little bit about this piece at the opening. And the piece was about a family home that was sold. It wasn't my home. It wasn't about money. It was about sentimentality. It was a house that belonged to my grandparents when I was a child. And so it had, I had always known this home. I knew like the texture on the walls. And then it was sold, and it was sold at a time when the price of houses was very low. And at that same time, I was also able to buy a house for the first time, and I was 48 years old. And so, like a lot of Californians, I was not able to buy a house until I was all done with school, partially done paying off my student loans. It took me a very long time to buy my first home. And it was very difficult to buy a home because we were competing with investors who were paying cash for houses. So we had to try again and again and again and be rejected, along with all the other people who were trying to buy their first homes. And it really made me aware of this problem. It made me really angry. I started really thinking about issues of gentrification and access to homes, even when the prices are low. I thought it was really appalling that there was no way for me and a lot of other people to buy a home. So this is a property that belonged to my family, and it was a weird house. It was a lot. There was a lot of home. It was very run down. My grandmother died when she was 98, and so she had no money. She was like land rich and cash poor, like a lot of old, Californians. And so she didn't have money to fix up the house. And then she had destructive grandkids who kind of trashed it too. So it was a complicated situation, and I did a lot of writing about it as well, and that was part of the piece. So the installation has two additional components, and one is this pedestal. It's an acrylic pedestal that I had custom made with like grant money. I'm a teacher, so we have an opportunity to apply for grants sometimes. And then it has a monument on top that says security. And for me, that references both the passing of some matriarchs and patriarchs in our family, the lack of security there, at the same time that our society was facing a lack of security. So when I began working on this faux real estate magazine, I realized that something was missing, and it was agents. And I didn't want to photograph agents, people in the studio, and I didn't want to completely appropriate the images. So these are composites of at least 6 different actual real estate agents, and they look nothing like the originals. And there's 48 of them. And usually I don't talk about this, but the 48 is for the fact that I was 48 years old when I bought my first home. And the 91 actually is a symbolic number as well. And so that has to do with my personal life. So all of my work, even though it appears to be kind of really political and humorous in this particular case, it's always personal as well. And so these agents are a metaphor for a corrupt system that, you know, basically locks out most working class Americans from buying homes, or at least a large number of them. And so that's what they represent. And so I'm not really making fun of real estate agents, although I did meet a lot of odd real estate agents when I was trying to buy a home. So that's for sure. I think some of it came from that. I should say I'm a photo-based or an image-based installation artist. So my work always involves some kind of imagery. So photographs, videos. I'm probably the least photographic person out of the 3 of us, but my work always involves photographs. And I also teach photography. So I have, I feel like that's kind of my home. That's where my home base is in photography, even though my work is installation work, and there's always other elements to the piece as well. So that's the agents. I think we're almost done with the agents. This is not all of them. It's a handful of the ones that I like, but there's others that I like that aren't here too. And I love her little red power suit. I feel friendly towards these agents. I don't actually feel hostile towards them. And this is an old version of the piece, an earlier version before all of the agents were finished, but I was involved in an exhibition, and so I showed what I had. And that's a close-up of the sign that I had made. And this is the latest metal print version of the piece that was completed in 2019, finally with all of the agents completed and together in a grid. And so in the summer of 2016, I went on a Camino, which is a walking trip. We walked from Portugal to Spain. And so I became very well acquainted with Portugal, which actually my ancestry is part Portuguese. I'm a mixture. So that's me walking along in Portugal in 2016. And what I found, I was photographing constantly, and I was really interested in how their perception of land use are both really, really different from ours, but they have some of the same problems that we do too. So this is a factory that's not really all that old, but it's vacant right now. And it's right next to this brand new, really chic little coffee shop rest area along the Tejo River. So I was interested in how there's not the separation like there is in America, but sometimes between like upscale things and rundown things. Here you can see a building where 2 buildings side by side were built at the same time, but they're in very different shape. Here's a building that's the inside is completely gone. There's just the front wall and there's plants inside. It's really beautiful. This is what people photograph when they go to Portugal, but I was interested in the way that they use land. And so this piece right here, the property, see what's in the background there, the brand new houses? That's what happens to these beautiful properties is they end up like this. And these are usually owned by, not by Portuguese citizens, but by people from the UK or Scotland, and they buy the property and they only live there a few months a year. So it really runs down the entire neighborhood. There's not a sense of community there. This is a train that is a running, working train. I rode in this train, but in America, it would have been shut down because it's not slick enough. So I was interested in those different values. Really beautiful graffiti there, addressing some of the issues that we, have here too. But like, there's not a hostile art attitude towards graffiti there like there is here. Community gardens, lots of public artwork. And this is not a wealthy country, right? It's just a difference in a value system, how they spend their money. So this is a tribute to José Saramago, who was a famous author. And he's huge. Like if you sit next to him, you're dwarfed by comparison. So I really liked that reference. Another public art piece where they put up this kind of metal scaffolding to make that building safe, but it also is creative. Here down in the front, you can see ruins all down here. This is right on the Douro River, like a big commercial area. And yet, you know, the value of the land is not the same as, like, say, along the San Francisco Bay, where no one could afford to live there. And then they have really high-tech stuff like I can't think of the proper name for that thing right now, but it's like a sky thing that takes you from one side to the other. Then they have all these little cafes all throughout Portugal. They all look almost exactly identical. And these are meeting places. Sometimes in the tiny towns, this is the only business in town. And people meet there. They talk about politics. They talk about stuff going on in their neighborhood. And they also watch TV. They watch programs on television that have to do with sports, like football or politics, and they have really lively discussions there. So this was my proposal for a sabbatical I took in 2017. And I went to an artist residency called De las Heras 18 in Porto. Porto ended up being one of my favorite places in Portugal. It's a little less fancy than Lisbon, but I really liked it. It reminded me of San Francisco, maybe like 30 years ago, like when I was a kid. So the room on the left was my little room. It was not an upscale artist residency, but it was great. It was perfect for me at the time. So we went on little trips around the city, and this is Galeria do Sol, where I ended up having a solo exhibition the following year. So what I was doing was I was interviewing Portuguese citizens. I was interested in how what was going on there was similar to what was going on here, but for different reasons. It's mostly due to tourism, their gentrification is. So this is Fabiana Martins. She's a bookstore worker, a student activist, a student and an activist. And this is Francisco Aguilar, and he is a restaurant worker, and he also volunteers at a place called Rosa Imunda, where you can go and have dinner or lunch for pretty cheap, like 25 cents or something like that. Daniel is a professional artist. He has his own studio there, really beautiful studio in Porto. Julianji Mati, he's originally from Brazil and has lived in Porto for like, I don't know, 17 years, something like that. This is one of his professors who is a professor of urban planning, drove us all around Porto. So this is a video piece. I'm just showing stills from it. And this is Paula Castro. She's an albergue owner who we met when we were on the Camino, but we became friendly with her and stayed in contact with her afterwards. And Rui Zink was actually, I took some Portuguese classes at San Jose State where I teach in preparation for the trip. And he was a guest speaker, and I ended up interviewing him for the piece as well. And he's kind of famous in Portugal, so it was cool to be able to do that. I'm not sure if this is waiting for me to push it to go forward. Okay, it's going by itself. I have it timed, so it's supposed to move by itself. So these are stills of additional footage in the video. So I filmed some of the places that they were referring to. This is the bookstore that's closing down. This is talking about the Socialist Party and how they are creating a minimum wage of 600 euros a month, which is not very much. Here we have a sightseeing bus, which is a big problem. The tourists are what's causing the gentrification in Portugal, all over Portugal. So you can see the cranes all over the place where building is being done. This was a transition between night and day because during the day, it's a really lively shopping space. And at night, there's homeless people sleeping in the storefronts. And this is when you walk across the Douro River, this is a really famous painting over to the left. So we had a video, open studios, and I had a video lounge, and I showed a rough cut of this piece. And I had like little pillows and places to sit around in my studio. And it was like a little theater. And like 200 people came. It was pretty well attended. So I made two pieces in 2018. They were both little solo shows. One was Café Espejo, which means cafe mirror. And it was a simulacra of one of those Portuguese cafes. And the point of the piece was, like, if you look at the images, I've gone back and rephotographed, and I have even more relevant images now. But what I was hoping for is to create a place where discourse could take place about gentrification. So the video was running up on the wall. And then there was images of you can see what a place that has not yet been developed, and then another place that is in the process of being developed. And I called this the Virgin of the Brandy. But there's a lot of little like altars in Portuguese stores that remind me of the altars that are here in California as well. And the menu, I created the menu myself, and on the back it had a history of Portugal. And the point of it was to kind of tie it into America, show similarities. Their sugar packages have like practical facts on them and I was interested in how that's different from something that's purely commercial, like measurements. And then that same year in November, I had a show at Galeria do Sol in Porto, Portugal, and it was a simulacra of a United States real estate office, but I did also include the same video with the interviews. And there's the agents in another form, and I had to create something that was really cheap to pack and ship because they weren't paying for the shipping. They were only giving me a small amount of money to do the show. And so we decided on like using banner prints and putting them up with magnets. Normally I show my work really formally. That was a compromise that I made. And also that gallery is like a kind of an industrial space. So it worked well there. That's the front of the building where it was installed and from different angles. And I sourced all the furniture and stuff there, got it at secondhand stores and made some of it myself from stuff I found at a hardware store. And I picked that kind of disgusting green on purpose. Just, I don't know, real estate offices sometimes have really tacky colors just to get your attention and get you in there so that you can buy and sell. So the whole idea that housing is a commodity that should be bought and sold is a problem. It means that prices are going to always continue to go up and the young generation is going to be locked out. So this is a brochure that I made in place of the actual magazine. And it has writing on it, and I'll just read it really quick. It says, "Why was this property abandoned? Was it the result of an upgrade, a foreclosure, a short sale, a sad story, a bad memory, the victim of unprecedented circumstances? What caused this historical outcome? Careless choices, a doomed marriage, poor planning, ungrateful children, an inheritance battle, a generation more interested in money than land? Who built this house? A man with his own hands, a family, a local company, a corporation? Does it make a difference? What were the people like who lived here, died here, kept it up, let it go? A house is a dwelling, shelter, refuge, comfort, security, an investment, bargain, burden, gamble, speculation, a body with constant needs of its own, and skeletons, all houses have them. Homes outlive their so-called owners, like parrots or tortoises, with human caretakers serving their needs until the next generation. Homeownership is America's favorite mass delusion." So this was a solo exhibition, and it was my chance to put these pieces together, which I felt belonged together, but I had to contextualize them properly for people to see the connection. And I was really happy that people from a different country who didn't necessarily have a full command of English, they understood the connection between the agents, the faux real estate agency, and the images downstairs, which were the images of my family's house. So I offered like little flashlights. I thought of all these elaborate ways that I could light it, and I decided not to light it. It was kind of a Zen type of process because I labored over those images so much. And here's the security monument in a different form. Underneath that mound of dirt was the sound of crickets. And I really wanted it to be almost like a graveyard or a mausoleum. It had a really somber feel compared with the quirky agents upstairs and the real estate office. And people liked going down there. They would spend some time down there. And these are details of some of the images. So it was dark unless you used your little flashlight, and then you could illuminate the images. And I really labored over those photographs to make them these perfect, pristine, beautiful images. And it felt really good just to put them in the dark and let people look if they wanted to, and just kind of feel the presence of the place if they didn't want to look. And it was almost like a forensic examination of this house that I was never going to get to see again. And here are people sitting in the gallery watching the video. And this kind of gives you a sense of there was a loft level upstairs, and that's where the agents were. This was a show I was in last December, and it was kind of cool because that their flyer showed this room exactly where my piece lined up. And this is the show that I was just in. I'm still in at the DeYoung as well. That's where my work is located. So this was a presentation that I gave at the MLA in 2019. And I'm currently working on a formal US version of the solo exhibition. It has a working title of Home. And among other new elements, it will include statistical information like metal prints with statistical information on it in one whole section that's separate from the agents and also from the pictures of my family's home. And it will have statistical information like this, but updated. This is the information that I used for my presentation at the MLA. And this was kind of interspersed with pictures of my work. So there's two sides to how I'd like to continue on. And one is to continue working in different spots around the world, because gentrification is a problem all over the world. It's not just a problem in the United States. And the problem is neoliberalism, the neocons who have adopted like capitalism and kind of like worship it, and then land becomes a commodity every place instead of just in the United States. And the reasons for the gentrification are slightly different in each place, but the same exact thing is happening. Like the workers are ending up having to live farther and farther out on the outskirts of the city. So that is the end of my images. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Valerie. You know, your work, you hinted at it when you said, well, you teach photography, but you're removed from photography, and seeing these other aspects of your work really make me long for the days when we're able to get back in physical space together, because you're not just making images, you're making these physical spaces that we move through. And that actually kind of leads me to a question I wanted to throw out to the three of you briefly. Anybody else who has any questions, please put them in the chat. Let us know if you would like to unmute and turn on your camera, or you can do it over text. But one of the things that I noticed just now, or I've come to understand about your work, Valerie, you've created a space, your own sort of reality that people enter into in order to come to understand the point you're making about capitalism and change. Trent, I'm thinking about the reality you created in IKEA. I loved the story that you shared about people joining in that experience. We can see it in the image that you were at in IKEA, but you also sort of created an event. You made your own reality and then documented it. And William, I see in your work the signs. You're not just documenting space. You are each asserting yourselves in a space. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that part of your process. Or am I way off and like not understanding something? But there's something that you bring of yourselves to the world and then document that seems very powerful in the points that you're making and the ways you're expressing yourself in your work. Anybody?
I see the connection. I might not have seen it before, but I see it now. I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Trenton.
Yeah, no, definitely. I definitely see it. I see, I mean, I think that one of the biggest things that we all bring is purpose when it comes to the reasons that we chose, I would say, like the locations of where we shot, and the words that were on the signs that were chosen, and even the captions. I want to highlight one thing that I love about William is the captions that he uses are speak even more telling to draw people into a realism aspect of it as well. So I say I think that's like the biggest thing I see between us all. Like we definitely have our own. We intertwine our own individual storylines and history. You feel me? Into our work to give it that deeper connection. You feel me? For other people to perceive as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, you know, we use different systems of how we make the work, our process is a bit different, but I think it's all interconnected. You know, yeah, people have kind of talked about my titles. You know, we've as someone that has gone through institutions, I've always, try not to do too much code switching. I think, the way I talk in my neighborhood, in my hood, is the way I kind of want to also do that work, put it in my own, in the space of photography, right? Because I think we're always, taught to kind of, be more quote unquote professional in spaces like institutions that, again, time and time again, where is USC? It's in South Central. It's, it's in a space that definitely is, you know, these other universities are in spaces that definitely even gentrify those neighborhoods, right? So I think, I think definitely I'm still thankfully haven't been displaced, but I see it so more often now. A lot of the mutual aid work that I do is like, Valerie was mentioning about the renters. It's like the city is mostly renters.
I just want to call out a comment that Alana Rios made for Trenton. She said, "Thank you for using the word intertwined. I think all three of you are using this as a tool to bridge the personal and social issues." I think maybe that's what leaps out to me in at least aspects of all your work is that you have each brought something personal. You're not simply documenting with your photography. You're doing more than that, and that's interesting. Um, yeah. Another question I had, we gave as we were making these groups. We looked at all of our forecast artists. We're so excited, and visually and thematically, we started to see some groupings. This group, I think, simultaneously leapt out as, oh, it just feels like this will be an amazing conversation between these artists. It feels like the connection we've already started talking about and noticing is there. But I'll be honest with you, I think we were hard pressed to give it a title. How do we explain what it is exactly? And we ended up, I think, let me go to the site so I can read it. We said Depicting Capitalism and Displacement. Was that the right title? Does that work? Are there other connections? Did it feel right? I'm curious as to how you reacted to that title when you knew you'd be speaking to it with your work.
All right, so I'm gonna say something real quick. When I first read it, I understood the connection between it. However, as I started, that's me personally, as I started like thinking about, okay, where was my actual headspace at that particular time? Me personally, that really wasn't, you feel me? Where my headspace was. Like, I wasn't really in there thinking about like capitalism, and like, so for me personally, I definitely understood how the work definitely had representation of it. You feel me? Of gentrification, and I definitely saw the connection of it. So me personally, I tried to kind of like work it in there, but not like harbor on it super hard because like, I didn't want to like, stray too far.
And maybe that's okay. It's there almost in passing. I think when we listen to you talk about your work, like when I first saw your work, maybe it's a miss, but I see your characters. But then, at least in that body of work, your characters maybe isn't the right term, but I see the relationship and the weaving and what's happening with the young women you're photographing. But I see the IKEA, and it's interesting that for you, that was almost secondary.
Yeah.
William, the choices of where you situate your images feels much more deliberate. But I'll come back to rephrase the question. Our title, Capitalism and Displacement, Valerie, William, did it work for you? Did it feel forced?
For me. It works for me, but I just wanted to comment when I was listening to Trenton, it wasn't that different for me. Like when I first started photographing my family's house, I was not thinking about making a piece about gentrification or about how difficult it is for Californians to buy houses or anything like that. I was just documenting a space I wasn't ever going to be in again. So, I mean, I think a lot of times our personal impulse to photograph something, after we look at it, we kind of start to understand what it's about, maybe in a way that we didn't understand when we first started photographing. Or I just start seeing connections between I like to make connections between things. So I could see a connection between what I was doing, what I was concerned about, and what was going on in our larger society right now. So yeah, that's where I came from with it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, for I don't like to use the term that I'm an organizer or anything like that, but I think a lot of the stuff I do work outside as an, you know, I'm just not an artist. And you know, for me, this tool, you know, photography, photo-based work that I do is kind of a um, something that I definitely make on purpose, and as a tool for like liberation. You know, especially, and I use hyper local, very, very, you know, like my neighborhood, my city. Um, and I think, you know, when I was thinking about the work I've done before, I try to make it kind of quote unquote universal. And it wasn't really, I wasn't feeling it too much because I think I just know myself more, and I know my city more and my neighborhood more. And I think I felt more comfortable doing that. You know, when I used to live in Chicago, you know, I myself thought, you know, I need to definitely look at myself as this person coming into another neighborhood that is in this constant flux of gentrification as well. And the best way to do that was I came back, I came back home, and wanted to do the same work in a more kind of uh, very connected to my hometown and to my upbringing, and to the people who you know whose lands this is, which is, you know, Tongva for where I'm from in Anaheim, in that connection with my indigeneity, right, and you know the difference between you know, being Mexican indigenous between and the difference between you know, being native in the States, which is definitely about land, and we're seeing that kind of that movement of land back. I think that's where the story starts with you know, some of the new work that I want to create.
I want to call out Mitzi has been writing some wonderful comments. And there's one where I think she summed up something really important, where she said, artists of the show have risen to be great. Well, let me read the whole thing. Displacement needs to be explained because the people being displaced are often economically depressed. Artists of the show have risen from that to be great visual communicators for the people who need their stories to be shown and told. And I think that sums it up so beautifully. And you're not just telling those stories through photographs, you're doing it with the way you make those photographs. And even if it's a little less explicit in some cases and more explicit than others, I think the way you're making the work and the fact that it's coming from you as members of that community um, is important and interesting. Mitzi, would you like to speak any more to that comment? I've been reading them as we follow along. Don't feel like you have to, but I wanted to extend that opportunity. In the meantime, and you can let us know in the chat if you'd like to, Mitzi. I want to give you three an opportunity to ask questions of each other. Now that we've seen the work, we've had some time, we've looked at images and forecast. Anything come to mind?
I really loved William. I loved the way that you were making the invisible or the erased visible, whether it was the gang signs doing the happiest place on earth.
Hmm.
That was a really smart piece, and also the packing house. Um, and I'm going to look up that article too. Some of my relatives worked in packing houses here in San Jose too, and they were always like working class people, usually people of color, you know, working there. So anyway, I really love that whole idea of going through archives and finding ways to make a past that is not celebrated or even visible anymore, making it visible. I think that's very important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that history is tied to, you know, epistemic oppression and this kind of invalidation of our stories and our histories. you know, we know, like one of the, I think, comments that I did receive when that, in both the museum's Instagram and my own Instagram was, you know, the comment of, you know, white people work there too, which I think, you know, then it kind of surprised me, not surprised me, but I think, I'm like, I thought I made my work super kind of not too confrontational, but very direct to what the idea of this work is, because I mean, you know, the sun-kissed posters all over the city, you know, very sexualized, like white femme on these posters, you know, that erases the kind of labor of brown and native people that had worked in these spaces. But yeah, no,
class too, that work, because even I saw one white woman in one of the pictures that you had there, right? But I doubt if that woman could have afforded to pay like $6 for whatever it was you said that was being sold there. You know, it's ridiculous. And so it's an issue of class too. None of the people who work there would have been able to afford any of the stuff that's there. So I'm not negating the issue of race, which I think is very important. And that kind of a response really annoys me. It's like saying, you know, lives matter too. We already know that. Okay, that's not what this is about, you know? So, yeah.
Well, we have a few minutes. Oh, go ahead, was Trenton, were you gonna go
Yeah,
ahead?
yeah. I wanted to speak on Miss Valerie. Now question, Miss Valerie. Now, your real estate agents. That was facial swap, was it? Or was that what was that? I want to ask that before I continue.
It's not exactly facial swap. It's not an application or anything. It was just
Right.
meticulously going through and blending features. So somebody's eyes and somebody's nose and somebody's mouth and a different person's torso and somebody else's hair. And so it was like that. It was done by hand. It wasn't done with any kind of an application.
That was my question, and if it was done with that, or if it was done with like a form of composition, basically. So
Yeah.
yeah, so no, I just definitely want to highlight how I love that, and it kind of gave me like, and so I kind of assumed that it was some type of AI. It definitely gave me a I guess like a future-esque type of vibe as well, because I know with everything that is going on kind of like right now, it made me kind of question, I don't know, kind of like question like reality in a sense, you know? Can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
kind of like I'm frozen. But yeah, I just definitely wanted to highlight how I just loved how you created that composition and gave, you know, your story through it. That was just a beautiful, beautiful project. And how you were able to create that movement and actual physical application with it as well, and use the flashlights. I think that was brilliant. I'm very big on like actually having like, you know, physical interactions with your work as well. So like, I just want to highlight you on that. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, I loved your work in IKEA too. I just thought that was brilliant. You know, just it doesn't matter to me whether you were thinking specifically about anything to do with class or race or the purpose that IKEA serves, you know, in a community or any of that stuff. I just thought, and the whole idea of like home, and you know, it's not really a home. They're setups of a home, right? They're a model. And so I just thought it was brilliant. I thought it was so funny and really smart. And the way the women interact with each other and sometimes intertwining their hair, I just thought that was a brilliant, you know, project too. So I feel very proud and honored to be with the two of you in this talk.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, William, like I said, I definitely want to talk to you about, I love your captions. You film, your captions are amazing. Especially one where the guy was running. I can't remember the exact caption for that one, but that one was hard. And then another thing I want to talk to you about was how you chose to get body signs, like signs that weren't like, of course, I know that you're kind of shooting from a distance. So, you know, of course, you want to be able to get the person, but then also the environment. But you chose signs that not only covered just their face, but kind of gave like even more of of body coverage as well. You feel me? Which I think is different because you could have just covered their face. You feel me? You could have put it to the side of them just to get, you know, but you actually kind of like allowed them to be there, but kind of like drown them out just enough for you to capture them, but then like give you that focus, you know? And I definitely wanted to like, you know, say like, I definitely like, I saw that's dope. That was dope. That was super dope.
Yeah, all those are me, like me running away and me with the signs. You know, I think there was a time when I, you know, I love performance work and I love how, you know, body and space, land, all kind of like connect. Sometimes when folks do like, you know, these performances, especially like the work of Rafa Esparza, who you know is very much. I mean, I'm not at that level at all, and you know, but I think it's just like negotiation with space, especially like as you know, as someone who is brown or you know the other work of you know of other like black artists as well is you know we're in a space that doesn't really want us there, um, that has imprisoned you know a lot of my homies as well, and I think I want to take up you know more than just space, but as actually like this form of you know, and again, I'm always talking about like liberation because I think that's the end goal for a lot of the work outside I do. And not to, you know, as a younger kid, maybe I was kind of, you know, a little bit embarrassed of my accent of this kind of, you know, each city I think has this beautiful linguistic, um, you know, way of talking, especially communities of color and Black communities. Um, you know, and I want to be able to kind of bring that up in spaces like this as well, right?
Yeah, I agree with Trenton. I loved how uh, the caption that went with the image had different text on it than the actual image on the sign, right? So we get additional information about that space. I thought that was really smart too.
Also got like a little bit of culture in it too. You feel me? That was like a little you know, you got like a little culture in it. So I really, yeah, that was dope. Just
I could listen to all of you. Just we could just listen to this conversation. William, you used a word that I thought was important: performance. I think there's something performative that emerges in all of your work, and I think that's something that's really wonderful. And it kind of feels like that's where the conversation is going now. I do want to give us a moment. Mitzi, I saw that you turned on your camera. You had made some comments, and I thought you might want to ask a question. I think you're still on mute, though. I'm afraid we can't hear you. Let me see if I can unmute you. Um, I'm sorry, Mitzi. If I'm afraid we can't hear you, but you can type your question in the chat if you like. Oh, oh, Mitzi, I'm so sorry. We're not able to make this work. Let me see if I can. I'm afraid we.
It's probably a setting on Zoom.
I
I just unmuted. Hi, can you hear me? I just unmuted myself.
okay. I'm afraid that gave us some terrible feedback. Now I'm afraid I might need to ask you to mute. I'm so sorry, Mitzi. But Mitzi, you know what? I please follow up with us. We will get that question and answer to you. Yeah, if there we go. Thank you. So listen, we will. If we can get on mute, Mitzi, we'll put you in touch. I think we all want to hear your question, and we really want the answer from the artists. So we'll try again another time. And I am sorry for that technical issue. I do want to read one more comment from the chat from Alana Rios. I'm reading this because they don't show up in our video, so I think it's good to capture some of these comments. It was for William, and Alana said, "Your work with the archive is not static, but also leads us to the present. Amazon's refusal to allow workers to organize the invisible labor behind our pandemic comforts is really salient and important work." And I thought that was a comment worth highlighting, particularly now in this time when we're doing a lot of buying and using a lot of services, and we don't see everything that goes into it. And we don't see the communities that are often taken advantage of. But we learn a little bit more about it through work like yours, William. We discover more about gentrification and in different facets from your work, Valerie. And sometimes it's just wonderful to be charmed by work like yours, Trenton, even if that background of IKEA ties it to the others, and we get a sense of that. I think there's a bit of joy. With that, I'm going to start wrapping us up. Thank you all for being here. We are a nonprofit organization, and this is a season of giving. So if you are not a member of San Francisco Camerawork, please visit our website at sfcamerawork.org. You can become a member, and you can also make a donation. And of course, maybe more importantly, you can see all the incredible work that is in the Forecast exhibition, including all of the work from the artists that you saw here tonight. Join us for our next event. I think is coming up. It's going to be on Monday, December 7th. We'll be psyched to have Ken Light. He is a professor of photojournalism at UC Berkeley here in the Bay Area. And he will be speaking to some new work that he made, a book that he has in our upcoming book and zine fair called Midnight La Frontera, which is images he made in the late 70s and early 80s at the US-Mexico border. So join us that Monday for that. Please visit our website, become a member if you aren't already. Thank you to Christina Graber for making this possible, as always. And thank you to all the artists, Trenton, Valerie, William. We appreciate you so much. And thank you all for being here. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks, Irene. We'll see you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.